All right, so we're going to get started. We're going to begin. You can all see the screen. We're going to begin with a recap of what we did last week, and then we're going to go forward. So we're in chapter 1 of the Rambam Shemona Perokim 8 chapters. And I'm scrolling back up to where he laid out the 5 parts of the soul. He explained earlier that one should not make the mistake of thinking that there's more than one soul to the person. There's one human soul, and the human soul has various different functions, and that's why people consider them as more than one soul, or doctors that he was referring to that's thought of them as more than one soul, but in essence, it's one soul that has various different functions. And he also described that considering that the human soul is distinctive from any other soul, animal or vegetative, I think that's the word, even if man and animal share certain functions and we both eat, we both sleep, but nonetheless the eating of man is the extension of the human soul, and the eating of the animal, whatever type of species of animals, is an extension of that particular animal type soul, and therefore should not be confused, even though they share the same name. Then he listed here, looking at number 3 here, the five parts or functions of the soul, of the human experience, and then he started explaining each of them. And we're just going to use this as kind of a recap to bring us to where we are. The first one is Hazan, that which sustains the nourishing soul, the fact that I can eat. This is also the reproductive system and all the complexities that go involved in digesting food and selecting food that's healthy for me and waste and all the rest of that. Margish is the 5 senses, as we know them. Hamadame, the imaginative, which is also related to memory, as we explained last week. And that one's imagination, one's creative ability is the comprising and deconstructing of various different memories. So you have experiences, you have memories, you know things, and then you combine things you know and take elements of some things and combine it with elements of other things, and together you create some new thing. So that's all the creative capacity to be able to select from my experiences and memories and create something new out of it. But it's not that it's entirely actually new. It's only new in that they're newly comprised of things that I've already experienced and already know. That's the Madama. And then we are now at the Misoder and the Sikhli. So let's go down to where he talks about those in particular, and we'll read forward. By the way, I looked up this word, the mutakalimun, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and I mentioned that in Hebrew it's midbarium, which desert people are Arabs. So I looked up this word, and it's actually Islamic philosophers. So, okay. The 4th of the 5 elements, the functions of the soul, is Misoder means that which awakens literally, or the fact that I'm driven. Here they translate it as appetite. I want things. I move to things. It's what we would call emotion/intuition, I think, as we'll see. So this is the power through which a person will desire something, the davar echad, for one thing, or you may say, or will be repulsed or disgusted by something. And from this capacity to either desire something or be repulsed, be repelled by something, this will come into various different forms of either being attracted to something or running away from something. Choosing something, one thing, or distancing oneself from those things. And therefore, in a more broad sense, we include in this category kas, anger, ratzin, desire, pachad, fear, gvura, strength, achzarius, cruelty, rachmanis, compassion, va'ava, love, asina, hatred, and all these various different experiences of the person's soul. So it's emotional, but there's other things here that are also not just merely emotional. I'm attracted to something, or I'm afraid of something. I guess afraid is emotion as well, but choice of something, being repelled by something. So it's partially intuitive also, but it is primarily emotional. The kli elu hakarchas, literally kli means a vessel, but the vehicle, the part of the body through which I experience this part of the nefesh, is kol avodah guf. This is the entirety of the body. For example, the power that's in my hand, to take something, to touch something. So this is interesting. Earlier he mentioned that there's one of the 5 levels of the soul is the sensitive, the 5 senses. Now, touching and feeling something is from the 5 senses, right? But then there is the capacity my arm has to reach out and pick something up. That's a separate capacity from the sensitive that's in my fingers, say. So that power that my arm has to go reach out and take something is an extension of my desire for that thing. Or my feet running. I'm afraid of something, so I decide to run away, or I want something, so I'm running toward it. That power to move, the motor, the motor skills of the body, that's the expression of this koyach hamis'oder, the part of me that desires things or is attracted or repulsed, wants, hates, etc. All of that motivates the body. The koyach ha'ayin al rois, and likewise, even the eye to see, even though I can't control my eye from seeing, but I could shut my eye and I can choose to look a different direction. And likewise, koyach halev lisgaber lirei, and likewise, the power that's in the heart to overcome or to fear. That's why I said it's both intuitive and emotional, because when we think of emotional, we don't think of the power in my hand to literally move and pick up a cup of water. When we think of emotional, we think of what's going on in the heart. And if I'm strong enough, I can overpower some emotion, or I can generate some emotion or something like that. But here he's combining both those things together. The power for emotion, or to control emotion, these gaber, to overpower. And likewise, the motor my body has to physically move and get the things it wants or run away from the things it doesn't want, all come from the same koyach hamis'oder, the capacity to want. Or another way you can think of it is my innate interaction, or my interface with the world, maybe, if you want to call it that. Like the first part, the sensitive, which is also my interaction with the world. I smell, I taste, I touch, but that's involuntary. I can't, shut off my sense of smell or sense of touch or sense of taste. But a voluntary interface with the world is, do I pick up that cup of water or I do not pick up the cup of water? Do I like that thing or not like that thing? So we can think of this as the voluntary interface with the world. My emotions, my desire for things, attraction, and things of that nature. Likewise, the rest of the body, that we can see, the external part of the body, and the internal part of the body, they and all of their powers, they're all vehicles for this voluntary interface with the world around me. Okay. So that's part 4 of the soul. We're going upward, the most physical of them, just the eating. And above that was the hazon. And then above that was the sensitive, my 5 senses. Above that was the imagination, memory. And above that is the emotional, voluntary interface with the world around me. The appetitive, or the desire. Then there's the 5th element or function of the soul, this is the rational, the intellectual capacity. This is unique to man, in which he can understand things, and that's how he can reflect or consider things. And through this rational soul, he can acquire knowledge. Through this mind, he can discern between that which is negative and that which is pleasant. Napolis from the various different functions. So in other words, the earlier functions of I want that cup or don't want that cup, the mind can say, well, that's a good thing to want, or that's not a good thing to want. Or I've experienced 2 or 3 different touches in the sensitive soul, and the mind can say, well, that was a good touch, that wasn't a good touch. This was a good taste, that wasn't a good taste. Things like that. All the other functions, the rational soul can discern between which one was pleasant and which one was unpleasant. Now, the Elu Apulis Mehen, amongst the faculties or functions of reason, is Mehen Maisi. Some of it is very practical, Mehen Yuni, and some of it is theoretical or abstract. Maisi, within practical, he divides it into 2. Mimenu Meleches Machshavas, there is the knowledge of knowing how to do stuff, how to build something, or something like that. Mimenu Machshavi, and then there is the intellectual side of the practical. We'll explain what that means in a moment. But basically, there is one is I have the skill set to be able to, draw something, draw a painting. And then there is the abstract. I can think about what colors would mix to get the color I want. Whereas one is just the skill of knowing how to paint. Let's say there are two elements of the practical. There's the actual knowledge and skill of the practical movements. And then there is the theory behind the practical movements. And those are both within the category of the practical mind. And then there is the uni. Then there is the theoretical abstract mind. This is the process through which a person can understand rules of life that don't change, as they are, meaning it's not about function, it's not about knowing something so you can get to some end, but it's knowing about it just for its own sake, understanding what is and what isn't, philosophy in the abstract. Not so much understanding, like chemistry, let's say, to a large degree is the theoretical of the practical. Right? You're theorizing about practical elements and what's going to happen if I mix these two chemicals and what's the reaction and how can I manipulate that for usage to make medicine or whatnot. Whereas the other part, the abstract, the theoretical, is philosophical. What's true, what isn't true, not because you want to do anything with that information, just because it exists. And this is what referred to as general information or knowledge. I think when he says that, I think this is referring to all the previous categories, not just the category of the abstract. Even though the way the commas are set up here, it would seem like it's only referring to the most recent one. But I think it's referring to just all the things mentioned before. That's what we mean when we say intellectual ideas, whether it's the practical, whether it's the theoretical of the practical, or whether it's just completely fully abstract. Now he breaks those down, those three categories, the practical, the theoretical of the practical, and then the abstract. Now, malachas machshavas, the practical knowledge, these are the power through which a person can learn how to do various different arts or different trades, kanagros, like architecture, Damas, or agriculture, refuas, medicine, malachas, is knowing how to navigate at the sea or in the desert or whatnot. This is all very practical information, knowing how to take this thing and put it here, knowing how to take that thing and put it here, knowing how to manipulate the materials that are around me to get the objective that I want. And then the more theoretical, this is the theoretical of the practical. This is the capacity a person has to observe that which he wants to do at the time that he wants to do it. If it's possible to do it or not possible to do it. It's not a skill of putting the pieces of metal together to make the bike, but it's more the skill or the knowledge of looking at the pieces of metal and saying, well, it's not strong enough to hold a person on it because of this, and it's not possible to attach it to the wheels and make it spin because of that. It's the theory of the practical. So I think it's like chemistry or things like that, where you're theorizing about what the practical results might be of certain materials versus, say, practical engineering, where you actually know how to take the materials and put them together. And the same thing can be true of medicine also. There's knowing how to move the body parts in such a way that they heal the body, person who does surgery. And then there is a diagnostician, I think it's the word, who is someone who can analyze the data, look at it and say, well, this is going to work, this medicine is going to work, that surgery is going to work or isn't going to work or whatnot. And in every field of science, you can split it into these two. The practical is the person who knows how to actually take the materials and get the job done, versus the person theorizing about the materials they're looking at and whether or not it'll work or won't work, why it'll work, how it worked, and that. So that's the practical versus the theoretical of the practical. Like he says, or maybe he theorizes that it shouldn't be done at all. This is enough to know the overview of what the soul is before we get into building moral character. Now that you know the overview of what the soul is, he kind of stacks these things one above the other: healthy body, nutrition, and then there's the senses, the five senses, involuntary interface with the world. Above that is my memories and my imagination. Above that is my appetite, my voluntary interface with the world. Do I take that? Do I not take that? Do I like that? Do I not like that? Am I attracted to it? Do I not like that? Am I not unattracted to it? And above that is reason. And the various different elements within all of these categories. So that's the overview in the Rambam's view of the human experience. Now, no, this one soul, which we earlier told you, that it has all these functions, or parts of it, it is like matter, and reason is the form. I'm translating literally, and I'm hopefully to try to explain what he means here. Because as you'll see at the end, he actually says that he doesn't want to get into the discussion here, but I'm just going to give you kind of a taste of what he's saying. And here we're going to see a bit of a contrast between the Rambam and Chassidus, and we'll lay it out now, and then that will help us understand as we go forward. So, when the matter, does not get the form, in this case, the reason, then the preparation of this form which is essentially to be able to get, the preparation of that material so that it can receive a form will have been for waste, because that's the purpose of preparing a material, is that it can get the form. It's as if it was a wasted existence. And this is what our sages say, the verse says, soul without knowledge is no good. Okay, so just explain what this means. Matter and form are philosophical terms used. I'm aware of it from Jewish texts, and it's basically a way of describing the physical versus the spiritual of everything that exists. In Chabad literature, you would call it sometimes oid and keli, light and vessel, or sometimes even nefesh and guf, soul and body. So just to give you a very practical idea of looking at the form versus the material. The table that the computer is on right now is made of wood. Now, before it was put together to be a table, it was also just that, wood. That's the material, but it doesn't have any function. The function of table is a theoretical concept that has been attached by an artist to this table, right? Before this table existed, or before however many tables the carpenter made, the idea of tables existed. And the person knew about tables, he used tables. There was a concept, there was an idea of using materials to put them together in such a way that I can put things on them. So that's just the material, it's raw material. And the purpose of the raw material is that the artist can then take it and attach to it, assign to it a function. That function comes by way of its form. In the case of the table, the person took the wood and very skillfully crafted it in such a way that I can securely put my computer and have my dinner at this table. Right? So the very physical table has its material, has its physicalness, in which after I break it up, it didn't lose it. Even if it lost the form of table and I completely destroyed this table, all of the material would still be there. All the chaymer, the material, the wood, would still be there. But it lost its purposefulness. It lost its form. It lost its, that's why I use the word spiritual, but you can think of it as metaphysical. The metaphysical function that this material provides is no longer there, even if all the material is there. So, you take this a little bit further and you get to the idea of the soul versus the body. After 120, the physical body, at least for some time, is still there, but it lost its soul, lost its life, it lost its function. Right? The same thing on higher levels, angels and otis and kalim, light and vessels, etc. Now, in terms of what I'm saying here, it's that the ultimate function and purpose of man, his surah, his true form, is his intellectual reasoning capacity. And everything else, his body, the fact that he needs to eat properly, the lowest level, and then his sensation interacting with the world, involuntary interactions with the world, and then his imaginative, and then even his appetite of the misorder, the part of the soul that wants things, that's attracted, that's not attracted, the one we described earlier, all of that is only a preparation. It's only the material upon which we are going to form and fashion the ultimate function of the person, which is his knowledge and reason. This is the Rambam's view of the ultimate that a person can possibly get to. Above that, as he describes elsewhere, and I'll mention it this at the end here, is prophecy. person has to have a perfect body, and then he has to have a perfect character. And if he has a perfect body and a perfect character, and then upon that, he's able to use his reason to understand the world around him, understand the sciences, understand the philosophy, and then understand Torah. And then he can finally reach to communion with Hashem, in which he gets some insight akin to some sort of prophecy. This is the Rambam's view of man's ultimate perfection. This notion that the person's physical experience and even his emotional experience are only a matter, are only the framework or the material upon which we are going to impress the ultimate function of man, which is his reason. That's going to become the basis upon which everything's going to go forward, even though the rest of the chapters are not going to be discussing reason itself. It's going to be discussing character traits. But the purpose for refining one's character, that Rambam will go ahead to describe, is so that he can properly use his mind to reason his way to a real relationship with Hashem, with the divine. And this is an area where there's quite a contrast to Chassidus. Because whereas the Rambam is like going bottom upward, person has to perfect his character so that upon his character he can imprint the ultimate form of reason and communion with the divine in that way. So this is almost the other way around. The Alter Rebbe talks about not that the mind serves the heart, but in some degree it does. In the premise of the Alter Rebbe is the verse which says, the premise of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, the verse which says, for the matter is, for the matter is very close to you in your mouth and your heart to get it done. And the entire premise of the book is, how can a person make himself to the point where he's actually motivated to want to do it in his heart? That's the premise. Now, in order for one to truly feel an emotional attachment to God, the Alter Rebbe posits that one needs to use their mind to discover who God is, what is God, who is God, and why should I love him? Get to know him, and then you'll fall in love with him. That's the Rambam, that's the Alter Rebbe's approach, which means the ultimate objective in Tanya is not the intellect in and of itself. It's actually the emotional. The ultimate is emotional attachment to God through love and fear. The medium and the manner through which you're going to get that is by using the mind to comprehend the divine to the best of your ability and appreciate the divine to the best of your ability. And therefore you can, by appreciating and understanding, you can be in awe of God, you can be in love of God. But the ultimate is the emotion, the emotional attachment to the divine. Whereas in the Rambam, it's not that way. The ultimate is the intellectual, borderline, prophetic communion with Hashem. In order to have a proper chaymer, a proper matter upon which this ultimate form of divine, intellectual, reasonable communion with Hashem is going to happen, a person needs to refine his character. But the refining character is not the ultimate objective. The refining the character is a stepping stone to get to the intellectual relationship with God. Whereas in Chassidus, it's the exact reverse. The ultimate is a refined character and an emotional attachment to Hashem. And reason is the way in which you're going to get to there. So you already see this very stark distinction between Rambam and Chassidus in that sense. Now here comes two interesting observations. Number one, in chapter, I believe it's end of chapter 8. I believe it's end of chapter 8. Maybe it's end of chapter 7. Not sure. The Alter Rebbe discusses what he calls klipas noiga. Klipas noiga is most of our world, which is not godly per se, but isn't trapped in such a place where it cannot be elevated to godliness. Simple example, again, use the table. This table is just a piece of wood, it's a table. I can sit down and scheme to do terrible things on the table, and if I did that, then this table would become in service of something negative. And if I sat down at the table and studied Torah as we are doing now, then this table now is a medium for my connection to Hashem. So it can go either way. And the Alter Rebbe says that the sciences are in the same realm. The sciences take, engineering. Engineering in and of itself is not godly, nor is it trapped in such a place where it cannot be used in the service of Hashem, but certainly can. The most basic way, there's a few ways the Alter Rebbe mentions, but the most basic way is if a person makes a living by being an engineer, and then lives a wholesome Torah life with the money earned by his engineering degree, then his engineering degree was in service of Hashem, which is something similar that the Rambam talks about in his book of laws about eating, sleeping, and drinking so that you can have proper function to serve Hashem later. But then the Alter Rebbe adds like this at the end of the chapter, that another way in which, well, first of all, he warns against the dangers of doing this because pursuing science is, because of it has its effect on the intellect. So if one misused it and didn't use it in the service of Hashem, its effect on the soul would be worse than, say, eating some kosher food, but not using it in the service of Hashem, just eating it because you're hungry. So the dangers are greater there. He warns against that. But the point I want to make is the following. He says that another way of elevating the sciences is if one knows how to use the sciences in his Torah study. And he says, this is the reason for Maimonides and Nachmanides, that their knowledge of the sciences was such that they knew how to use their knowledge of science in Torah study. So that's one interesting observation. So I don't know what it means. I'm just putting it out there. Does it mean that the Alter Rebbe is saying that this path of the Rambam, that the ultimate is intellectual capacity, is if one actually knew how to do that and knew how to gain knowledge of sciences and all these things and philosophy as the Rambam did himself and he encouraged others to do, and then knowing how to ultimately incorporate in Tanya, that's for a higher level that we shouldn't aspire to? Or is he saying that we should aspire to? I don't know. I'm just putting what the Alter Rebbe said there. That's the first observation in the context of this contrast between the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe. The second observation is, we mentioned earlier in the beginning of last class and the end of the class before, the Tzemach Tzedek's comment. The Tzemach Tzedek commented that the soul described by the Rambam here, this one soul, is the human soul described by the Alter Rebbe, the animal soul / natural soul / vital soul, which means as follows. We might then say, we might reconcile these two paths by saying as follows. Because the Rambam is talking about the human soul and the human characteristics, and indeed the human soul is meant to be refined so that it could be imbued by the godly soul. In other words, like this, when the Rambam is saying bottom up, refine your character so that you can properly appreciate intellect, and in that, through this intellect, commune with the divine, that's a stepping stone where afterwards you can take that intellectual relationship with the divine that the godly soul then brings, introduce the Alter Rebbe, and bring that back downward into the heart so you can have an emotional attachment to God. So in the same way we said in the previous class that the Alter Rebbe starts with Rambam left off. The Rambam talks about building the human character because he's talking about the human soul. And then the Alter Rebbe goes a step further and says, being a perfect human is good, but now you got to get godly, introducing the godly soul. So we might therefore reconcile these two directions in that sense. The Rambam is talking about elevating the human experience to the point that it's ready to listen to the godly soul. And the Alter Rebbe is talking about the other way. Now that your animal soul is ready to listen to your godly soul, what are you going to give it? And if you give it godly ideas, it'll get emotionally attached to God. This is a possible reconciliation between these two paths. But again, this is only my interpretation, and the floor is open should someone have a different way of understanding this. Okay, let's finish the chapter here. Okay, so let's see this paragraph again. This one soul, which we earlier described, its functions and its various different parts, the 5 different levels. Is a matter, or actually the 4 different parts. The first 4, up until and including the appetite of my desires to want to connect to the world around me or being afraid of the world around me, is like material. And the intellect, la tzura, is a form, is the ultimate function of it. And if I perfected my character, but it doesn't get that form, it doesn't get that ultimate function of the intellect, then the entirety of all that preparation of l'kabel hatzora, which is really in order to only be able to receive that form. The reason why I'm refining my character, so that eventually I can truly commune with the God in some intellectual capacity, would have been for waste, because I've refined my character, but I haven't taken the next step of giving it the ultimate form, the ultimate function, that surah, that comes with reason and intellect. And it's as if it was a wasted existence. And this is what the meaning of the verse is. Without knowledge, a soul is no good. That's what I mean to say. The existence of a soul, which won't get to that ultimate form. It'll be a complete soul, good character, healthy body. But below das, without the knowledge, without the reason at the end, loy type is no good. But, says the Rambam, issues regarding the form and then that form being properly implanted on the material, in this case, reason being properly imprinted on the material of my good character, etc., Vadeus and the various different types of intellectual form, Kamahem, how many there are, how you get them, this is not the place for this. But we don't need to know about that information in order to talk about refining character. Because the book going forward, as I mentioned before, is introduction to Pirkay Avot. It's all about refining one's character. The primary function here is going to be on my character, my emotional, cribbing my emotions and stoking the ones that are good, etc. But you should know this is only a stepping stone for the ultimate form, reason. But understanding how reason is going to be imprinted, not the discussion here, because our discussion is about perfecting character. And this is more appropriate for the book of prophecy, which we mentioned. I'm not sure which book he's referring to. Perhaps the Shemonah Perokim, because in the Shemonah Perokim we does discuss this idea of getting to that ultimate reason and then moving on to levels of prophecy. But I don't know if he means that book here, because I'm pretty sure this book was written much before the Guide to the Perplexed was the Shemonah Perokim. At this point, we'll stop this chapter, the Asla Ba'acher, and begin the next chapter. So we're going to stop over here. And if you had any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Is there any questions?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining. And God willing, next week we get into where Torah mitzvahs fit into this experience of the human being, where perfecting character comes in, and how that all works. So looking forward to continuing.
Yes, you call off, Rabbi Levi. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.